Alright, welcome back guys. So I figured I'd show you guys the laptop build that I was talking to you about in regards to the external GPU. Now I haven't gotten all the pieces in yet, so I'm just going to get started without some of them and then continue the video later on once I get everything kind of synced up and once I get it all up and running properly. But I wanted to give you an overview of how I'm going to do things, what's next for this project basically, what sort of things you're going to need, what sort of tools, and what specifically I'm doing. So as you can see, this is my laptop in front of me. Now in my case, I have already had to take off the back cover. For your laptop, you may need to take off the keyboard, and what you're actually looking for is a place where one of these, which is basically your Wi-Fi card, used to sit. In my case, it was right here. It was just secured by a screw. And so what you need to have for this build is a bunch of little tiny screwdrivers. I have just a bunch of, basically random ones that I've been collecting over the years. If you don't have those lying around at your house, go to iFixit or go to Amazon and get like a small watch repair kit. That'll usually have all of the screws that you need. Obviously have some gloves. You're going to be working with components that are ESD sensitive, so they're potentially going to get damaged. Something else you're going to need is obviously your external GPU dock. So I have the EXP GDC Beast. It's version 8.0, which is mpcie compatible for my laptop. Again, if you guys haven't seen my previous video where I describe what sort of ports there are, take a look at that one first before you continue on to this video. For my specific build, I'm doing an mpcie build, so that's why I have this adapter. What you're also going to need, most likely, is a USB stick. This is going to be for the software that allows you to actually manipulate the BIOS settings if you have a whitelist for the card. You'll be putting a software on there that I'll link to in the description. If you're not going to be using your Wi-Fi card anymore, I highly recommend getting one of these USB Wi-Fi adapters. They're really helpful. You're also going to need a pair of tweezers for all the electronics that you have. Most likely you're also going to need some electrical tape to insulate, whatever internal components. You may also need some snips, some wire snips. They kind of help in cutting down certain components or any wires that you may need to in the process. And as you can see right here, hidden by my Ethernet cable, I also have a bunch of magnets here just in case I ever end up losing any of the screws. It's super important that you have some kind of magnets around because these laptop screws are very tiny. Now you don't have to get the ones that I have here. This was kind of a pain in the ass to make, but what you can do is, you can basically just get a bunch of round U magnets and that'll get you sorted. So again, one of the first things you may need to do is take your laptop apart. In my case, I already have, and in here used to be my SSD, and I'm actually going to grab it to show you guys a size comparison here, so you can see exactly what it looks like in comparison to this little M.2 SSD. So as you can see, this used to be my SSD in place right here. As you can see, it takes up quite a bit of space. Now I have this little adapter which takes it from SATA into an M.2 style adapter, which is really great because it gives me so much more space to work with. And the reason for this is because I'm actually going to be putting one of these graphics cards inside my laptop, and it's crucial for me because I need the extra space. I need as much space as I can, because in addition to this, I'm also going to have a bunch more wires running in here, and also internally I'm going to have the adapter, such as a Beast but significantly smaller, in here to get this up and running. But for this video, I'm going to be concentrating on the Beast specifically. So one of the first things you're going to do is, after you've removed your Wi-Fi card, which again, typically they look like this, and you can see right here, basically by the width of this port, that it's an mpcie card. I made the mistake originally of buying PCIe adapters for this, for my external GPU, and they don't fit because they're a lot thicker, so you really want the mpcie. Now, once you've done that, you basically plug this guy in and use the original screw that came with your adapter, your Wi-Fi adapter inside the laptop, to get this thing in place. And then you just run the cable outside of your case. That gets you pretty much up and running. And from there on, what you can do is take one of your cards. In this case, for my laptop for the time being, I'm going to be using this GT1030. So what you do from there on is you basically take your little EXP GDC adapter, you take your card, and you just slot it right in. So this will be the second step. Now again, it's a little bit more difficult to do when you have just one arm doing it. You want to be kind of gentle with this. Mine slots in really, really difficult. I don't know why, but you know, it is what it is. Once you have it slotted in, what a lot of people don't actually tell you is that there are a couple of little ports right here that tell you ATX on, which basically means that the card is going to stay on whenever the power supply is turned on. And this is very important for detecting the external GPU in the beginning. There's also another switch in here which basically does a delay. So when your computer boots, it delays when the card shows up, which is important because if there's a whitelist that's on your motherboard, sometimes if the card gets activated first, it will shut down that port and not allow the card to be recognized at all. Again, important to set the switch. This is called a PCD switch. It may be different, but basically on HW tools adapters, they have this one, and on newer Beast EXP docks, they have this as well. So again, set the ATX power to on and the PTD switch to whatever delay that you want that works for you. In order to get to these switches, you actually have to take a little plastic cover off of this thing. But again, you know, you just use one of these little screwdrivers and it comes right off. Real simple, real easy. Now, as you can see in here, here's the HDMI port, but it's not actually for HDMI. This particular port is designed for this cable right here, which actually goes right back into your laptop's Wi-Fi card slot or whatever mpcie slot you were using. So don't mistake this for an HDMI port. This is purely for the PCIe connection. Now in here, you also have a USB port. Sometimes you can supply power to this dock using a USB port. I don't really recommend it. Now for my card, I can actually use this little 12-volt jack on here to supply power, which is awesome because it actually means that I don't have to lug around an external PSU with me. And I'll show you guys the one that I have in just a little bit here. But I'm going to move on to these other connectors. So in here is a power in connector. It also has power out. You know, I'm not really sure why you would need the, power out, but they do have this 6-pin connector, which is meant to go with your standard power supply. So you would just connect this in here for the cards that do need additional power. So something that's a little bit more, beastly, you'll be basically using this connector. Now keep in mind that if you have a graphics card that happens to need more than, just a single 6-port connector for power, it most likely won't work with a dock like this. You'll need to get, something a little bit beefier that actually allows it to have additional power inputs into it. So just, again, keep that in mind. Basically, the setup is pretty simple. Once you have your card in here, what you're going to do is you're actually going to take this HDMI cable and you're going to plug it in here. Then what you're going to do is you're going to plug in the power in here, and that's it from, the dock's perspective as far as that's concerned. So the next part that we're going to do is we're actually going to go to our laptop and we're going to open it up. And what you will need to do is, once you've turned it on, you will need to actually go into your disk settings and see exactly what it is that your disk is set to, because in order for the external GPU to work, occasionally you may need to actually use the eGPU do-it-yourself software. Again, I'll link that in the description, but I'll turn on my laptop and I'll show you guys what it looks like in my particular case, so you can see exactly what it should look like, what it might look like in your system, and I'll also go over some of the errors that you're likely to see as you're putting your eGPU in, and what sort of steps you need to take, and where is the advice to be able to follow along so you can actually get your card up and running. So stick around, we're going to do the laptop part next with us actually being in the operating system. Okay guys, so here we go. This is the information for my laptop. As you can see, it is a Sony Vaio Fit 15. If I scroll down here, you'll actually be able to see that I am indeed running a GeForce GT 740M. It's not a particularly powerful card, but here's what I have now in GPU-Z. As you can see, it's a GT 1030. You can see the clocks right there. These clocks aren't actually represented correctly, so I'm going to open up HW info here and scroll down until I see the video adapter. As you can see, there's my laptop again, so there's no confusion. And then there's the GT 1030. As you can see, there it is right there. You can see all the information as well as the more correct clocks. And now I'll also show you guys what's happening with the PCI buses, and that my bus is actually not hot pluggable. You will see that one of the ports is, but not the one that the GPU is actually on, which is port 3. So you can see right there, not hot pluggable, but yet my GPU still works. Alright guys, so in this next part we're going to go over what happens if you go into your device manager but yet you don't actually see the card. This will be kind of the first step, the first troubleshooting step. So if you go under display adapters and either you're still seeing your old card, or if you still happen to be seeing absolutely nothing aside from the integrated GPU, which for most people is probably going to be Intel. You may have an AMD integrated graphics card if you have an AMD processor, but for this scenario we're going to focus on the Nvidia cards. So as you can see, mine is in here, but if yours isn't, there's a couple of things that could have possibly happened. One of them is if you're on mpcie just like me, there's a high chance that there's a whitelist. Now, is there a way to get around this? There most definitely is, and there are a couple of ways of doing so, but one of the first things that you should try and do is to actually basically go under your laptop again, very carefully, and using latex gloves. You want to remove the eGPU cable, and you're going to plug in your Wi-Fi card. And you have to do all of this with the laptop off, first of all. So when you do that, you're going to basically turn your laptop on. You're going to let the Wi-Fi card get discovered. Then as soon as the computer boots, put it to sleep. You're going to unplug the Wi-Fi card, and then while the eGPU is turned on, so make sure the fan's spinning, lights are on, so forth, you're going to plug it into the port where the Wi-Fi card used to be and screw it down correctly. Now after this, you're going to resume the computer from sleep and see if you're able to detect anything in the device manager. Now there will be a couple of different scenarios that I'm going to get into later on in regards to what exactly you need to troubleshoot and when you see which type of image and what to do next. But for the time being, what I'm going to focus on is if you already did that and it's still not showing up. Well, you're going to need to get a software called Do-It-Yourself eGPU. Now this is pretty cool software because it's basically an extension of the software that would be in your BIOS, or firmware rather. It allows you to modify a number of settings that otherwise wouldn't be accessible, or that you would otherwise have to get a modded BIOS for. Now, if you don't want to pay for this program, you can still look for a modded BIOS. Nobody's stopping you, of course. But I think at $15, this will basically save you just so much time. So, what happens next? What do you do after you get this software, essentially? And I'm going to go over that right now. But one of the first things is after you get the software, you're going to want to do the following. So you're going to also want to get a program called Paragon. In my case, it's the Hard Disk Manager 15. I'd recommend getting the professional version, and there's a good reason for this. And the primary reason basically is that you're going to need to switch your disk from a UEFI install, and from GPT you want to switch your disk into MBR. Now I know this is probably kind of crazy. You may think like, oh, I have to do all these extra steps. It's actually not as difficult as you think. So again, you're going to want to go down here. You're going to look for products for Windows and then Hard Disk Manager. Now there's I guess Drive Copy 15 and Hard Disk Manager 16. It doesn't really matter which one you get. 16 just as good as 15. I have 15 personally. But anyway, you're going to download this software. So what you're going to do next is I'm going to actually launch mine. And I'm going to go down here and show you what you need to do. And the reason for this is because most Windows installs nowadays, there's a pretty high chance that they're going to be a UEFI GPT disk. So the problem with that is that when you try to run eGPU and install it the basic way, is that it essentially won't let you do it on your disk. So that's kind of a problem, because if you want to run the software, your disk has to be an MBR disk. Now, as you can see, mine currently is, but it used to be a GPT disk. But this is pretty easily remedied. Basically, what you're going to go in here is you're going to say convert. So if your disk was GPT previously, which mine was, you're going to hit convert. It'll start the conversion process, and you're going to want to, say, keep all the partitions, basically, because you want to keep everything the same. You'll hit the apply button right here, and that'll start the process. It'll ask you to restart your computer. Now at this point, it is also pretty important that you have either your Windows disk ready, or you have a Windows recovery USB available, as well as, you know, potentially something like Paragon's recovery software, which you can also get from them. And the reason for this is that sometimes when you convert the disk, even though it's supposed to be like a really easy, simple process, the OS just decides not to boot because there's something wrong with the boot sectors or the master boot record, so on and so forth. So what you'll want to do then is basically open up the, you know, Windows disk or USB and get that process going in terms of doing the startup recovery, or if you're using Paragon's tools to go in and basically fix the boot record, you know, fix any partition issues and fix startup issues that may be present there. Now, when you go back in here, what you're going to look for is, I've actually downloaded the program to my local disk, so I'm going to go ahead and open this up. It's in my eGPU folder. You're going to scroll down, and as you can see, there's going to be a folder, or file rather, that says setup disk image. This is what sets up the eGPU application to allow you to modify certain settings in the BIOS that otherwise wouldn't have existed previously. Now, on my computer, despite me doing the conversion of the disk from GPT to MBR, it still decided not to run. And so at this point you might think, okay, well crap, you know, this software doesn't work, I'm going to try and return it, but it's actually not true. You can get this to run still. And what I ended up doing specifically is I realized that the software comes with this image file for the eGPU program, which you can actually load up onto a USB. And this is great because that means that now, instead of having to, you know, try and modify your Windows startup settings, you can just create a USB disk that's actually going to have this in here naturally. Now, I tried a number of programs to burn this program onto a USB. I tried Rufus, I tried Yummy, I tried a bunch of other different programs. What ultimately ended up working for me is a program called UltraIso. So you can download this online. I'll also have a link in the description below for the video. So you're going to go to UltraIso. You're going to open up an image, which is the system image. So in this particular case, we're going to navigate to the eGPU image. We're going to hit open. So you have this guy right here. What you're going to do next is you're going to go in here and look for make a disk, or write a disk image. So you're going to select this. You're going to click that button. Once that pops up, you will have your USB drive in here, assuming you have it inserted into your computer. If you don't, just insert it in there. You know, you're going to have this image file for the eGPU setup, and you're basically going to say write. At this point, it will ask you if you want to format that USB drive, and you want to say yes. You know, obviously don't keep anything important on that USB drive. That's not going to do you any favors. But basically, once that's written to, you'll be able to actually get this whole thing going, and I'm going to actually record the next part of this, which is when you go into the eGPU setup and what you need to do and what you need to activate in order to get your GPU to actually show up within the Windows Device Manager. This will be a really important step, and it's going to be a prelude to potentially any other errors that might come up once the eGPU does actually end up showing up in the Windows Device Manager. So hold on for that in this next part.